Fight.
Hey kick punchers, welcome to the channel. This is another tutorial series we're going to go through on something I hold near and dear to my heart, and that is the stories of some of the veterans who have served in some crazy combat situations. So what you see in front of you right now is my concept art and render of Dick Thompson, Dr. Dick Thompson, who was a MACV-SOG veteran in the Vietnam War. These guys did some crazy things. I've always been kind of obsessed with history and war stories and things like that. So there's plenty of podcasts you can check out on the YouTube. Just run a search for Dick Thompson SOG, MACV-SOG, and you'll find several interviews with this guy, and where he tells just the craziest stories ever, where these soldiers used to stage in Vietnam and then go off to Cambodia and Laos performing like super dangerous missions. All of SOG, they had like 100% casualty rate, which means that every single one of them was injured in combat. So these guys saw some stuff. So I think they're getting older now, so I think it's really important that we memorialize them and interview them and learn their story. And this is kind of my homage to Major Dick Thompson, aka Dynamite. And that was his code name, which is super dope. So we're gonna go with my typical kind of stylized approach, and what I'm probably gonna do is break up the videos in a way that one video will be making the AR-15. I guess it's not an AR-15. It's a CAR-15 in this case. And then another video will do the grenades and all those things, and then maybe another for the packs. But for this particular video, we're just gonna block out his base mesh, his body itself. And so I'm going to load up Zbrush here, and we're going to dive right into this. So in this video, I don't know if I'm going to go over the basics of Zbrush. I think I'm just going to, if you want to learn the basics of navigation and the very fundamentals of Zbrush, head on over to one of my other tutorial series, where I'll put a link in the description below that you can check out, where I talk about the UI and the history and navigation and the brushes and all that stuff. And I will try to be beginner-esque in my instruction, but for the most part, I'm going to just kind of dive into this. So I like to just start my project with something like over here in like a Dynamesh sphere. The 64 resolution is fine. So we're going to load that guy up, and it's going to just switch us into 3D mode so we can navigate around and tumble and all that stuff automatically. So, and typically what I do is I'll come over here to Lightbox Tools, I'll pick a project, and we'll start with like a humanoid type character, this male, ZPR or whatever. But I think for this tutorial, I'm going to start from the sphere. I'm going to start from scratch. So I'm going to switch over to my snake hook brush and start kind of defining the head of our character. And if you need some reference, there's a head up here. You can just look right at that guy. And just kind of rotate around. It looks like an alien, but be patient with yourself. You'll get it there. So just hang in there and be super patient. I'm going to make sure that I'm in Dynamesh mode with a 64 resolution, which I am, and continue to just pull things around using broad strokes. We're in the broad strokes phase. Okay. And then let's move along, and we'll append another sphere. We'll pull this guy down in Y. And this is going to be our kind of torso and abdomen. Just flattening a little bit, getting that into place. Make sure our symmetry is on by hitting X on your keyboard. Always make sure your symmetry is on. And let's say that I forgot to have symmetry on, and I pulled this shoulder out over here, and I got things the way I liked it over here, and I said, oh crap, I forgot to have symmetry on. You can come over here, make sure you turn your symmetry on with X, go to Modify Topology in your Geometry drop down in the Tool menu, and then go over here to Mirror and Weld, and click on Mirror and Weld, and it'll automatically swap that stuff over for you. And I think that has a tendency to turn off your Dynamesh, so just make sure you're still in Dynamesh mode in that stage. And I don't want, one thing I like about this this concept and the photo of the dude is he's not this super jacked looking. I mean, you'd never know this guy was like an elite warrior, which is cool to me. And actually, he was fairly small. He talks about his stature in his podcast. He's not a big guy, and I like that because I'm kind of scrawny myself. I'm kind of a rump, and so okay. So we've got basic proportions in here for the torso. We're just moving right along. And now let's just combine these guys down. So I'm going to merge these down into the same subtool. I'm going to come over here and I want to connect these two. And one of my favorites is the curved tube brush. And you can come in here at a slight angle and just kind of draw like the neck down in it. It's going to look weird at first until we run our Dynamesh. And then I'm just going to pull out like the arms. Too big. And you can still have control over this guy for the time being, so we can kind of just grab these 2 points, the end points, and add a little bit of bend in the elbow. Okay, and then if I left click off of that, we'll lose, it'll deactivate our little rig there, our little curve. And we can come back here and just run a re-Dynamesh, unmask and then re-Dynamesh, and then it'll combine all of our geo together. And then I'm just going to smooth everything out. His neck obviously is way too skinny, scrawny, so we're going to inflate that guy and kind of make that contact point a little bit better. Re-Dynamesh. So right now my big hitters are, my snake hook brush and my smooth brush. Haven't really played with any other brushes just yet, but we will when we get into the detailing. So adjust the posture of our character, give him a little bit of a hunch. We don't want him to be like Superman heroic proportions. So I switched over to the Damien Standard brush, which is another one of my big hitters. Love that brush. Also known as the Damn Standard, but I don't like to curse because I'm from Utah. We don't curse in Utah. We say things like heck and dang it and dagnabbit, stuff like that. Let me know if you want to know any other Utah curse words. I'm really good at it, god darn it. Okay, so I'm getting too into the weeds with the detailing. It's so easy for me to do that. I think that's part of a little bit of ADD, but anyway, let's continue our torso down to our pelvic area. Give him some glutes. Okay. Scooch that back in, that spinal area in. And then let's jump back into our hands here. So I'm just going to use the snake hook brush. If you'd like to, you can turn on Sculptor's Pro mode, which will generate the geo as you are. If I turn on Shift F with my polyframe, you'll see that it actually creates geometry as I'm pulling stuff out, which is pretty ideal with the snake hook brush. It's awesome, works really good. It doesn't work with all the brushes very well, fair warning. And for these fingers, I'm actually just going to go back to my favorite little, we'll do the curved tube scale in our diameter size, come into the angle, like a profile, and then just like draw kind of roughly what we want our fingers to look like. And then from there, I'm just gonna, right now it's still unmasked and everything else is masked, so I can just turn on my transform move transpose tool and just kind of copy these fingers over, and then we can adjust the size, adjust the size and the proportions of these after the fact. So just want to get the geo there and in place. And I like the fingers to have a little bit of a relaxed pose. It just feels a little more natural, so there's a little bit of a bend to those. And I'm just control left clicking and dragging on these arrows. I guess I should have explained that. Terrible teacher. I'm holding control and then just clicking on these arrows and dragging those out just like that. And now that because these are a separate topology, I can use my move topological brush and kind of crank my intensity and move those into place a little bit better. So let's get those looking good. And so those are a few ways you can either pull out with a snake hook brush, you can pull out the geo, or you can just use the curve tube. A couple of methods there. I'm going to re-Dynamesh and shrink wrap everything together. I think I had a stroke. Let's go to like 120 resolution, crank our resolution just a little bit. I'm going to turn off Sculptor's Pro Sometimes it kind of gets in the way of the workflow, I think. And then let's refine our wrist area just a little bit. And then let's eyeball our concept and just see, my proportions they're pretty in line with reality. There's a tiny bit of stylization, which is what I like. But we could beef up his arms a little bit, make him look like G.I. Joe if we wanted to, but I think I'm going to try to stick to the proportions of my concept here. And if you want to work off of that specific concept, I'll make sure that it's uploaded, and there will be a link in the description that you can grab that concept and join with me. So now I'm just kind of creating the wrist area, and then I'm going to inflate my fingers out just a little bit more, just to kind of get those feeling a little more natural. And then I'm going to use my move topological to pull out the middle finger, the birdie as we call it in Utah, and then the ring finger. And the ring finger and the index are usually pretty close to the same length if you're a normal human being. If you're abnormal, I don't know what to tell you. So again, I'm going to use the Damien standard and kind of just bring in the palm a little bit, details, and the little tendons here underneath the wrist. And I'm getting into the weeds still, but I want to just get these details just a little bit nicer. Square out the fingertips. Make sure you're tumbling around and navigating around. It's very easy to get locked into one view when you're in 3D. Might be curious about the setup that I'm using. I personally am using a Cintiq. I think it's a 24-inch Cintiq. It's the HD something or other. And I know that sounds fancy pants, and it kind of is, but for me, that's the only way to ZBrush. I love ZBrushing on my Cintiq. It just feels more natural. And I've been ZBrushing for years, for probably 2 decades now. So it just feels like sculpting a lot more than, say, using just like the tablet on your desk. So I'm just kind of pushing the proportions a little bit, walking around this arm, pulling out the elbow joint. It started to sound like a Wisconsin or from someone from Minnesota, don't you know? I've been watching some of the Fargo series, and it's just ridiculous. I love that accent. Which I think Utahns might have kind of a similar accent, to be honest. Like kind of a Minnesotan. We say, "Oh my heck." We don't say "don't you know" though, like Bobby's World for all you old folk that used to watch Bobby's World. So again, I'm getting into the weeds and just kind of drawing in my muscle definition just a little bit. We're going to give him a little bit of muscle, but not too much, because he's just going to have a jacket on anyway. He's going to have clothes. So, all right, so we're doing good now. I'm going to save, and just FYI, for those who don't know, I like to use my ZTLs to save. So I'm going to come over here and go save as, and let's see. Where am I going to put this guy? I don't know. You ever get so many projects going, you don't even know where to go? So I've already made a directory for this Henry Thompson guy. What I like to do is make a little ZBrush directory, like 1_Z, and then my other file formats, if there's like Maya files or Substance Painter files, I'll do like 2_MA, 3_sub. I like to do that. Just a little pro tip there. So I'm going to say Thompson, like the machine gun. Oh yeah, 001 to version my file. And the reason I put a version on there is because if you version your file, then you can then come over here to save next, and it'll automatically, if I go to save as, it made me a version 2 automatically. So heaven bless you, ZBrush, for that magical button. It doesn't always work. It starts to break when you start to get into Transpose Master and using different tools. Sometimes the save button, this regular save button, which they just added these 2 buttons in the last few versions, sometimes they break. But just remember, if they break, save as is your go-to. So still kind of refining this wrist area. It's looking a little bit mushy and blobby and stuff. Fingers are still looking a little tiny bit cartoony. Let's give him some like knuckles. So I'm using my snake hook still. case you were wondering, that's my jam right there. Love me some snake hook. Put that on a t-shirt. It's a very niche phrase. Redynameshing. It looks like our dynamesh got turned off somehow. Wish I could say how, but I'm going to crank it to 184. Just be aware that dynamesh sometimes will turn off, and he'll take a holiday. He'll go on vacation, and while you're still working hard, he'll just be like, see ya, I'm going to Cabo. So just refining the tops of the fingers, making it look like, you know, we got some bone structure in there. We're not just Gumby, you know. I apologize for all you kids who aren't catching all these isms. I mean, I'm gonna be 40 this year, so I'm no longer a spring chicken apparently. Which I'm fine with. I'm good with it. Thumb looks a little weird too. Let's give it that little crease underneath. There's another crease too, right around here-ish. I made a lot of hands in my day. I should probably be better at them than I am. But if you're like, whoa, how's he doing that? Just know that I've made a lot of hands. I've worked in the film business and the video game business for the last, I think, 18 years. Now, probably coming up 18. And the biz is kind of dead right now with all the strikes going on. It's been ugly. So okay. All right, cool. So we've got some arms and some hands in here. Looks like overall, looks like our arms are broken, kind of. So let's pull those into place just a little bit better. Okay, give him some pecs here. Work on this little area using the Damien standard. I like to scale this up a good size and kind of carve stuff back with that. I think it's a really, I probably overuse this brush. Most people ZBrushers are like, dude, you gotta chill. You gotta chill with the Damien standard a little, but I can't get enough of it. It's my crack. It's like my cocaine, man. If I had to pick one brush that I love the most in ZBrush, it would be Damien standard. I'm just gonna say it. We're getting into the weeds a little bit with the detailing on this. We gotta give him some legs first. Let's just do it. Just give him some legs. Okay, hitting save. And we're gonna come back to the curve 2 brush and switch to the profile view, and let's draw out some legs for this guy. So put a little bit of a curve there. Look at that, that's fun. That's fun. Scaling my size just a little bit, and then you can actually continue too. If you come down here to this little green circle down here, and you wait and you drag over to the side to where it becomes a red line, that means you can continue your drawing if you'd like. So we're gonna give him some super sweet feet. I don't know why it's snapping to the center like that. It's annoying. If you come up here, it worked the first time, as you noticed, but I'm gonna give up on it because it's getting annoying. So I'm just gonna get rid of this the curve in there by left clicking on the mesh and get these guys into place a little bit more and start smoothing away. Get them proportionally in line with where I want them to be. And I like to, little pro tip, I'm going to Dynamesh here real quick. Looks like our resolution is just a little too high. I'm going to come back down to like 120. We're not in detail mode, we're blocking out. I think come even lower than that. 70, we'll do that. I'm trying to keep it high enough that I'm not going to get my webs or webbing between the fingers that are sticking together as it's getting shrink wrapped with the Dynamesh, so I'm just kind of trying to stay away from that. But I'm going to pull out my feet here, snap to the bottom view, and just like turn on my Sculptors Pro and start pulling out the feet with this guy. Pulling back those heels. And I like my feet to kind of jut out at an angle just a little bit, just for visual appeal. Riggers will hate you for this. But I'm not concerned with those riggers right now. This guy's gonna be like a 3D printable figure, so I'm not worried about it. And obviously the feet look crazy. I think I'm just going to inflate those all out just a little bit. The feet are a tricky shape to get just right, you know? So I'm switching between my orthographic view and my perspective view by hitting P on my keyboard. And I'm going to just use my clip curve. So if you hold Control Shift, you can use any of these, like knife curve, clip curve. And the difference between like knife, these are my two go-tos, clip curve or knife curve. And clip curve, what that does, I'll just undo this, is it just pushes the geometry up to that line, okay? But if you go to, I promised myself I was going to say K less, because I hate that. It's super annoying. But if you hold Control Shift and you come over here to knife curve, make sure you save, because this has a tendency to crash things because it's kind of a newer tool. If you hold Control Shift, left click, drag a line here, that actually slices your geo. So it gives you an actual slice, which is really cool. But like I said, it can be buggy sometimes, so just giving you a warning there. So pulling out the tips of the boots. Gonna reDynamesh. Looks like it's not on again. I gotta figure out what operation I'm performing. And then Control Shift Control Shift clip curve. Words are hard, you guys. I barely speak English. It's my first language, yes, but I barely speak it. Thanks again for being here, for joining me. Having fun with all this stuff. Learning how to teach this stuff. Hope you guys are sticking it out and actually making your way through these lessons. I need some way to actually have you guys show your work so I can see what you guys are up to if you're actually making these things. I really have no way of knowing if anyone's using these tutorials, or I mean, other than I get some cool comments every now and again and some subscribers. And again, don't forget to like, comment, and sub if you haven't already. And he's got a little bit of a thigh gap here, so that might be something I'm going to minimize just a smidge. And just remember, we're going to extract clothing for this guy here. There's some pelvic area, so I'm using Damien Standard and then just smoothing things out. Okay. And a little bit of a rib area. But again, I want this guy to be smaller in posture. I don't want him to be Superman, so I mean, he's got to be fit, because these guys, they were, you know, this guy in particular was a Green Beret, so he went through the Special Forces process within the Army. And they would basically sneak in behind enemy lines, and they would hire, you know, locals to come in and just kind of teach them how to be soldiers. And they would take these guys deep into enemy lines, behind enemy lines, and just conduct like sabotage missions, and they were saboteurs, if you will. Whoops. Snake hook can get away from you a little. Okay. Turning on my perspective mode. And like I said, I like to just use my mask lasso here and mask out my legs and pivot those feet out just a little bit. I'm going to come over here to masking and click on blur mask and switch over. If you click on this guy, you can switch over to your legacy transpose tool, which will give you these little joints that you can draw out. And if you get those into place and click this inner white circle, you can rotate in this direction. So I'm going to pivot those feet out just a little bit for a peel. And just remember, if you are making this for like a rigging process, you'll have to straighten those out later on, or your riggers they'll lose it. They'll lose their ever-loving minds on you. Doing some calf muscles. I mean, these guys were fit. So these guys wore insane amounts of gear. That's why the concept he has just so many packs. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm obsessed with packs. I don't know what it is about them. I don't know what it is, but I love me some packs. So I'm gonna hit save, and we're just go check out our concept. See, like, look at these. It's called mole gear, and they have these mole gear, these packs that go all the way around them, like all the way around. These guys would carry like 100 pounds of gear. They'd carry tons of grenades, like a ridiculous, like 20 mags of AR ammo, of 223 or 556, whatever it was, and then they'd carry these 40 mic grenades, like a dozen grenades. I mean, these guys were stacked with gear because, I mean, let's face it, they were behind enemy lines. They were outnumbered multiple times. I mean, look at this sexy silencer, this can on the end of this gun. Yeah, you guys are awesome. So one thing I was going to show you too, I was going to see if I can figure it out. I can't figure out how to share my... I'm still learning technology. It's kind of hard. I couldn't figure it out, but I do have a bunch of images that I have in pureRef that I'm getting reference from as well. So I'm not just like pulling this stuff all out of my butt. Like I actually have reference up on my other monitor. So anyway, so I think our proportions need to be worked on a little bit. So you can always come up here to see through and kind of get things in line. It's getting pretty close. I'm actually a little bit surprised. His hands are probably way too big. So maybe what I'll do is I'll come in here and just hold Control and switch over to Mask Pen, and then start drawing my mask out. And you can actually drop your RGB intensity down just a little bit, and it'll affect your masking while you're holding Control, so you can really feather that edge nicely. Okay, and then Control left click tap to invert your selection, and then let's draw out our transpose tool. We have these, so remember we can switch between those transpose tools if we double click that button up there, and we'll get that into place. And one thing you're going to find is that Zbrush is terrible about, it's scaling from the center pivot and not from this guy, and I've always hated that, but it's something you just kind of have to deal with when you're dealing with transpose. So just remember you're going to have to come back here to scale, and then move things back into place on X. Just the way it is. I guess I should probably give Zbrush some feedback here and tell him the things that are no bueno. So just kind of trying to achieve this interesting little muscle here underneath and flatten out this area, because just working on my anatomy. It's something I can always practice. Everyone can always practice, you know, like look at anatomy and kind of get familiar with it. And we will be seeing his forearms, so I kind of want those to I want to have those on lock. So, and I think that's getting pretty close. If I alt tab into my concept, you know, I've got some nice kind of meaty forearms, some skinnier wrists, and then make sure you keep a little bit of a gap between the fingers for now, and then when we get into a cleaner geometry phase, we can, or when we start, we can shrink these together so those fingers are touching, so there's not these awkward gaps. But for now, just leave them, because when you run your Dynamesh, it's gonna shrink wrap those together. And we don't want to deal with that shenanigans right now, so I'm gonna crank this to 120-ish, or 190-ish. And give us a little more poly count. Okay, from here, so we've pretty much got our. Well, let's work on his face. Let's do that. We'll jump into his face proportions. So I'm just gonna use the snake hook and start pulling out his nose, and then his eyes. Push those guys in. Again, this is just the snake hook. We're navigating around, we're tumbling around a good amount. Another cool brush is the clay buildup brush. Do I even have that set to my, you know, I don't even have that set to any of my presets or my hotkeys, which is lame. But that's a great brush too, the clay buildup. It's really good for proportional type stuff. So this dude's gonna have a wicked sweet mustache. So let's start sculpting that guy out. Why don't we? Okay, and then some eyes. He needs some eyes. Okay, and then again using the snake hook to like. He's more slender fellow, so we're gonna try and thin up his face a little bit. Work on that jawline. He's kind of getting alien proportions. And Alien, that's going to be another series we'll have to do. Okay. And again, we are going for stylized, so the proportions don't need to be exact, but they do need to have some kind of semblance of reality. They can't just be, whatever. Okay, and he's missing those things called ears. So for these, I'm actually just going to mask this. I'm gonna control left click and paint a mask, and then I'm going to come over here to subtool, and I'm going to do a extract. So my thickness is going to be too high, so I'm going to drop that to 0.005, 4-ish. Hit extract, hit accept, and then what that does is that extracted that geo and slapped it into a new subtool for you. So let's just grab our center, our pivot here, and just start like rotating these ears out. And obviously they're going to be too skinny still. I probably could have added some thickness there. And then let's adjust our shape of those. So if you want to easily adjust your thickness, come over here to the deformation in the tool palette, and come down here to inflate and just do like an inflate. And then we're going to make these guys a Dynamesh by clicking on Dynamesh here. And they're a little bit out of place, so we're going to scoot those back a little bit. And that's looking good for now. So I'm just going to combine those into the geo. So I'm going to come up here to my top geo, and then I'm just going to subtool, I should say, and then merge that down to that other subtool. And now they're just combined together. But as you can see, it retained our little mask that we drew. So we're going to control left click and drag to clear our mask, and then control left click and drag again. And it's going to re-Dynamesh everything for us and shrink wrap that ear onto that head, which is exactly what we want. And what I'm going to do is undo that. And I'm going to come back here to this stage. And if I hit Shift F on my keyboard, you'll see the different colors of the polygroups that we have. And if I come over here to polygroups and do an auto group, any of the topologies that are separate, but even though it's combined into one tool, subtool, it's going to make polygroups out of anything that's not shrink wrapped yet. Okay, so these guys are now, if I control Shift left click tap on those guys, you can still isolate those shapes outside of the body mesh. Okay, so if I control Shift left click invert and then send this guy over to the invisible layer, control Shift left click and drag a rectangle, we now have our ears right here visible. And if I control W, it'll polygroup those together. So we want those to be together right now. And what I'm going to do is, because I still want to adjust these without affecting my other mesh. Okay, so I'm going to hold Control and drag a rectangle. Actually, I got to turn up my RGB intensity because remember we dropped that down, so that'll be a gotcha. Control Shift left click tap, bring everything back, and then invert my selection by Control left clicking and tapping. Turn off my polyframe, and now everything else is masked. And that's a lot of words and a lot of ways of getting to this point, but you'll use this a lot. So even though we've combined things together, we can still work on them separately, specifically with the snake hook, right? So for example, I wanted to pull this ear in and not affect the head geo. Now because the head geo is perfectly masked, I can just manipulate the ear where I'd like to. And you can actually just clear your mask, control left click and drag. And if you come over here to Dynamesh and turn on groups, what it'll do is anything that's its own group will be maintained in the Dynamesh and will be still a separate object. So what I mean by that is if I control left click and drag, everything's still Dynamesh, but it didn't shrink wrap this together. It stayed in its own mesh still, which is somewhat ideal for right now. And now I can use my move topological brush and still kind of continue to push these things around. And that guy doesn't have to be masked anymore because it's we have groups turned on in the Dynamesh. So let's say I just crank my resolution. I want to re-Dynamesh, give a little more resolution to that ear area, which is great. I'm going to use clay buildup and just kind of carve in that little ridge, and then carve in these details right here. You got to be careful. You don't want it to pop through, and clay buildup has a tendency to do that. Shift F to turn off my polyframe, because who wants to sculpt with wireframe on? Come on. Pull out this little nub right here. That's the scientific term, I believe, is a nub. And then push in, holding Alt, and just pushing in the detail here. I apologize if the instruction on this one is a little bit chaotic. I wanted to try doing it a little bit more advanced. I'm kind of getting tired of talking about the very basics of ZBrush, but let me know, like, if you guys prefer me to go over all that stuff every single video, the navigation and the basics of the brushes and stuff. or if you like to kind of just dive into some of the more advanced stuff immediately. So we're getting some of the ear shape in here. Gonna re-Dynamesh now, get us some good topology. Ooh, something broke maybe. Be sure to save just in case, because ZBrush can crash like anything else. And you might want to use the save next to version up, just to secure the state of your former ZTLs. Secure the state. It's a fun thing to say. So if we hit Shift F, we still have our polygroups. You notice that these aren't combined just yet, but if we want to combine those, we can just hit Control W. It'll make everything its own polygroup, and then if we re-Dynamesh, it's going to shrink wrap the ear into the head geo. You'll notice I like the term shrink wrap because it's like, I don't know, it's the best way I can think of to describe it. Okay. So we've got this interesting little thing that curves around in our ear right here. And re-Dynamesh again. Cool. And then I think that we will, let's refine his eyes just a little bit. Okay. So I'm holding Alt to, I want this guy to have like a stoic kind of look, you know, like he's a tough guy, man. This guy's seen some things. He's seen some things. I mean, in his podcast, he talks about having to kill guys with a friggin' knife, which is so crazy to think about, like hand-to-hand combat. Like, I know he's looking a little sad, but we want him to look more like, I could probably kill you in 56 different ways right now, kind of a look, you know. These guys are crazy. Just the mere fact that these guys could come home and have any kind of semblance of a normal life after doing what they did is unbelievable. I mean, a lot of these guys came home, started families, started businesses, and just kind of went about their days after having seen just the craziest stuff. So I'm just kind of working on the anatomy a little bit. Let's take a look at him. Let's look over at our concept. The resolution I have on this image is terrible, but it looks like he's got a really skinny bridge of his nose. His eyes are maybe a tiny bit closer together. So we'll try to get that. So the determination in his eyebrows, bring those guys down just a little bit. That's kind of bulging out in a weird alien way still, so we'll bring these guys down and in. And then work on the eyebrows. And he's got this kind of Roman-esque kind of nose. So again, my big hitters right now is just the Damien Standard, because I'm doing my detail work, and then another fun brush that I like to use is the H Polish brush, and I have that set to 4 on my keyboard. But if you want to get some sharp edges, because I do want to go for a level of stylization with this character. I don't really like doing photoreal as much. I mean, I'll do it for my job, but I like to give them my own signature, if you will. And I feel like for me, that's like, let's add some crisp, sharp edges in there. Like his jaw, his chin right here for sure could use like a sharp edge. And then maybe like this Adam's apple right here. So I'm holding Alt now with the H polish to kind of pull that out. Okay. And then let's go along this jawline and really sharpen that up. He's a young kid. He's not 40 like me. He's not losing his jawline. And I'm only mildly insecure about it. So, okay, I'm just going to continue to, using the Damien Standard brush, just lightly pressing and sharpening things up. And then he doesn't have a bottom lip, so we should probably give him that. So I like to use the clay buildup. Let's pop that out just like so. I love me some clay buildup. Damien Standard along the bottom edge of that lip to add the sharpness, and then using the good old-fashioned standard brush here for a minute before I switch over to my H-polish immediately and undo that. So yeah, it's pretty sick indeed. So we got to make sure that this is seen as a mustache, so we'll continue to carve that in. We can actually just like extract this as separate geo if we liked. But maybe I'll do that for now. So I'm going to hold control and use my mask pen and just mask the mustache area out. Okay. And I said okay again, dang it. And then I'm going to come over here to Subtool and down to Extract, and I'm going to crank this to 0.009 and hit Extract and hit Accept. And now we got bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, so I'm going to smooth that in and come over here to Geometry, Dynamesh, and then using my Damien Standard and my various fancy pants tools, I'm going to get that detail back. What's going on here? On snake hook? No, Damien Standard is what I want. And this guy doesn't have like the bushiest mustache. I mean, this guy's just a kid, which is the craziest thing ever. I like to think about these guys were kids and they were doing this kind of stuff. Clear the mask, you know, to go over there and see the things that they saw just being, you know, 18, 20 something year old kids. A lot of these guys did go through the Special Forces pipeline, and so that kind of in and of itself meant that they were a little bit older, because a lot of that's like a 2-year, it's like 2 years of training for those guys. I'm not going to focus a lot on the upper lip just because it's not going to be seen. So why do that? Unless you just really want the practice. Okay, so now we've got his mustache over here in a separate subtool. We can kind of just keep refining this guy. I kind of like doing that separately, that kind of stuff. I don't think he had it going down the sides as much because that's not Army standard. I think you gotta have it like trimmed right there, even though these guys like didn't fit the Army standards. Today's day, they worked a lot in Afghanistan, downrange and working with the locals. So the job of the Green Berets is a pretty cool one. I've done a lot of research on this regard. Like these guys specialized in, their motto was liberating the oppressed. So their job was to sneak in behind enemy lines, meet and correspond with and develop a rapport and a friendship with the locals, and then they would train them and teach them so that they could basically overrun and turn over the government from oppressive regimes. So in this case, you know, the Taliban had taken over Afghanistan, and so these guys were charged with going in, building up little armies out of the locals, training them, and then dismantling the Taliban from within. And if you go into like, if you research the 5th Group Special Forces in Afghanistan, they went in right after 9/11, behind enemy lines, inserted in from Pakistan, and just started taking it to the Taliban with, you know, air power, air superiority, and a mix of that, and working with the locals to fight them. And I mean, these guys just wailed. There's a movie called, I think it's 12 Strong, that you can watch that kind of talks about their exploits and what they did. Green Berets are crazy. They're easily the craziest people on the planet. Governments fear the Green Berets, which is cool to think about. And that's another thing that's cool about this interview with this guy is he's interviewed by a Green Beret in one podcast by it's called Mike Force by Mike Glover, who's a former Green Beret. So they get get into the weeds and talk about stuff that you just wouldn't have thought about. These guys are just fellow special forces soldiers. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna pull down this little. So just continuing to do my refinements as I blabber on about stuff. Let's make sure that we have saved. And again, like as far as anatomy and muscle structure go, if you want to practice that, like by all means dive into it. I'm not going to push it that hard because we're just not going to see any of this stuff when we get all of this gear on. And there's a lot of gear to go through. So we're at 45 minutes now with this particular video. So I think I'm gonna pause it and move on to the next one for now. But in the next one, we'll go over his BDUs, or his battle dress uniform. So that's like the very basic clothing that go on before all the gear gets attached. And so he's still getting too jacked. Too many traps going on. I just did the Venom Spider-Man episode, and so I'm still stuck in like, I gotta make this guy like jacked. Okay. A lot of you guys are like saying things like, oh, I can't believe you do this for free. And I'm like, ZBrush is kind of a beast to learn, you know? Like it really is just a beast. And so I'm happy to help. I'm happy to just kind of teach. I find a lot of joy in it. I really enjoy doing this. So don't forget to support this old 40-year-old in his endeavors. I'm thinking about starting a Patreon maybe where we can get access to, you know, more instruction, or 3D print files. So like one thing that I am doing is I'm trying to sell these files too. So if you don't want to necessarily learn ZBrush, but you want access to this file, by golly, you can go to my website and you can download that and send it off to a printer yourself if you'd like. I might even do some resin kit runs at some point where I do my own casts, and you can buy resin casts of some of these figures. But I want to maintain this. I'm interested to know what you think about this, where I'm drawing attention to people that have actually lived, you know, like specifically guys who have fought in just crazy situations, you know, have crazy stories through all different conflicts and wars throughout time. And thought about doing some Delta Force guys from like the early 90s, from like the Mogadishu Black Hawk Down situation. Randy Shugart and Gary Gordon were the Medal of Honor recipients, snipers. That went in and to save some of the downed pilots there, and they have such a cool story. So I like drawing attention to these guys. They were real heroes. Me, I was too much of a baby to enlist because it was scary and I didn't want to get shot at. But these guys did it, and they did some crazy things because of it. So I think it's worthy, you know, drawing attention to them. So his shoulders are a little knee. So I don't know why I'm going into the weeds with this. I guess I'm talking and so I'm not paying attention, but anatomy's fun to practice. Like it's always really beneficial, I think, because we're going to do our extracts from this geo when we extract our clothing. So it is beneficial, I guess, to kind of maybe have some of that structure underneath when we do our extracts. So just smoothing it back. Okay, and let's think of some stylization we can do real quickly before I close the video up. If we Alt-Tab over, so the idea behind stylization, right, is you pick the features that stand out to you about this guy looking over here. And so if I were to zoom in right here and switch over to like a red pen, create me a new layer, you know, his eyes have this very, you know, kind of like this kind of shape. So and they're kind of really close together too. So I want to keep those close together. That's a feature. The bridge of his nose is really, really skinny, so I need to keep that. And then his ears are popping out, and that's probably because he's got this beanie on that's popping his ears out just a little bit. His chin isn't super heroic and huge either, so I'm going to try to achieve that too in the likeness. And I might have pushed his chin just a little bit too far. Maybe scoot his bottom lip up just a little bit, pop those ears out. So these are just little things that can help you to achieve that likeness of that specific person, because that's what we're trying to do here. Bridge of his nose needs to get skinnier. And again, just look at reference too. You know, watch those podcasts, because he's on those podcasts. He's getting older now, but his features are all still relatively close to the same, you know. He's got a few more wrinkles, but that's going to help you to get there too. So if nothing else, I want you to watch him just because it's just super interesting people that have put themselves in these crazy situations to fight these wars. And and they have stories and wisdom to share. So I'm still trying to deal with the overall bone structure at this point. Ideally, I should have locked that down a little bit better before I started doing my detailing, but it's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. So using Damien standard and holding Alt to kind of just pull out those eyebrows just a little bit more. Maybe I'll add like some wrinkles in the forehead. This guy's like, I'm going to war, man. I'm going to war. Okay. All right. I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna go with the eyelids. Like in the past, I've just kind of given these guys little black dot eyes. But for this guy, kind of, I don't know. We'll see if it works. So rotate around. Be sure to rotate a lot. His neck's real long. Everything's looking real kind of skinny and scrawny, but he's gonna get so bulked up with gear that I'm not worried about it too much. Okay, and now I'm just dragging this out. So I think we're good for now on the rough block out of the body. So I'm gonna hit save or load tool, I guess. I'm gonna hit save and end it here. But again, like, comment, subscribe, and share the content. Get involved in the discussion, you know, below. Like, what do you think about me doing several series of characters like this? Is that something that would interest you all? And we can talk about the history, talk about the background of some of these guys as we go. It's kind of fun. But in the next video, we'll dive into the clothing, the BDUs, and the battle dress uniform, and get this guy clothed. And then from there, we'll start dividing up the tutorial videos into, you know, the weapons and the packs and things like that. So anyways, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in the next video.